What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the Martian MMA podcast. I am your host, and my name is John. And this week we are back to analyze the UFC 265 pay-per-view going down Saturday night, August 7th, 2021, headlined by Ciryl Gane versus Derek Lewis. This 13-fight card will take place from Houston, Texas, which means it will take place in the large UFC cage. And before we get into this week's fights, just a quick recap of last week's event. I went 4-5-1 on official predictions, but still profited 3.09 units on official track bets. And if you actually go back and look at the past two UFC events on the podcast, I've predicted more fights wrong than I have correctly, yet have still profited 9.08 units during that time frame. So it's not all about official picks and who I think is going to win the fight on official prediction basis. It's about who I think the betting value is on, where I think the percentages are off, where I think the market is off. So don't always just bet on who I say is my official pick to win. Bet on who I say the betting value is on, and keep that in mind. Also, one more shout out before we get into this week's podcast. I did release the Martian and Ozzy show about 24 hours ago. You can hear me and Ozzy's thoughts on the entire card. If you like a little bit more back and forth, a little bit more of a casual conversation of these fights, go over and listen to that one. It's a little bit longer. It did clock in close to 2 hours this time. And if you like the short, concise breakdown with just me, then continue listening to this one, or maybe listen to both if you're a big supporter. But I appreciate everyone listening to both podcasts. So with that being said, we're going to get into the first fight on this UFC 265 card, which takes place in the bantamweight division. We have Johnny Munoz as the minus 254 favorite, taking on Jamie Simmons as the plus 214 underdog. I actually still think there's some value left on Johnny Munoz here as a favorite. I know it's heavy chalk in the minus 250 range, but I really cap Johnny Munoz closer to 80% here, and I do have a big bet tracked on Johnny Munoz here. I have 3 units on his money line at minus 230, and I have a parlay with him and another fighter on the card, which we will get to later. I won't spoil it ahead of time, but I'm very confident in Johnny Munoz here. Just looking at Simmons, he's dropping down from 145 to this fight at 135, and Simmons just doesn't look like a good fighter anywhere. He looks very sloppy in the striking and grappling, doesn't seem to be a big power threat on the feet. I wouldn't even give him a striking advantage here against Munoz. Striking is the area where Munoz is the most green. He's definitely a grappler, looking to get the fight to the floor with his wrestling and his jiu-jitsu skill in most of his fights, and he is a black belt on the ground, and I think we're just going to see some massive levels in this fight between the ground game between these two. I think that Munoz is going to be a much better grappler. He's going to hit takedowns. He's going to keep top position, and he's probably going to finish Simmons on the ground here. But even if this fight stays on the feet, I think Johnny Munoz probably has a slight striking advantage just because Simmons is so sloppy, and Munoz shoots a high amount of takedowns. He fought Nate Maness in his UFC debut on just about 24 hours notice and still shot a high amount of takedowns there, was pursuing takedowns in the clinch nonstop, was pushing Maness against the cage, was trying to take him down for the full 15 minutes. So if he was shooting takedowns against Maness, who I consider to be a better fighter than Simmons for the full 15 minutes on short notice, I think he's going to have no problem doing it here. So I'm really struggling to see any way that Johnny Munoz loses this fight. I mean, I guess some flash knockout in round 1 is Simmons' best chance to win, but I really think that one takedown from Munoz is probably going to be the fight. He's just going to outgrapple Simmons so badly that we're probably going to see either a depleted Simmons in round 2 or he's going to get finished in round 1. So I think the Munoz should cruise to a pretty easy victory here using his wrestling and his grappling to win, and I think he's probably going to get a finish. So I think we could see a Munoz TKO from a ground and pound or a submission. So I would just take Munoz money line here. I think there's value all the way up until minus 400. I mean, I think he should be a hefty favorite here. So I'm going big on Munoz here. It's one of the bigger bets in the past few months on the Martian MMA podcast. So I'm pretty confident it hits, and the pick is Munoz by submission. The next fight takes place in the women's flyweight division. We have Melissa-Gatto as the minus 114 favorite, taking on Victoria Leonardo as the minus 106 underdog. I actually have another bet tracked on this fight, and I know it's low-level women's MMA. I know you can't be too confident in either side here, but from the tape that we've seen, I see a lot of advantages for Leonardo here. So right off the bat, you can just look at their resumes and see that Gatto hasn't fought since late 2018, so it's coming up on 3 years without a fight for her, and most of her wins are guard submissions where she involves getting taken down by low-level opponents and hitting some weak armbar or triangle or Kimura off her back. But I've seen her taken down and put on bottom for long periods of time. She's really bad off her back, and she's so reliant on those guard submissions that she can just lay on her back for 4 or 5 minutes of an entire round. And there isn't much footage of Gatto striking out there, but the limited footage we have seen, she looks like a very sloppy and ineffective striker, and I wouldn't even give her a striking advantage here over Leonardo. So unless Melissa Gatto has massively improved in the 3 years away from the cage, and it's likely that she has slightly improved, but she's going to need some massive improvements to beat Leonardo here because she just has so many weaknesses that I think that Leonardo is going to be able to exploit. And since the last time Gatto has fought a single time in MMA, Leonardo is 6-2 during that time period. She's been in there with tough competition like Fiorot, like Miranda Maverick. She's won fights over Invicta vets. She's won fights over lower level women's MMA competition. You know, she's done a lot in the time. She won on the Contender Series against Hackett, and she showed a good game plan there to get inside on an opponent, to hit those clinch trip takedowns, to stay safe in half guard when you're on top, and she eventually passed them out and pounded Hackett out with some really good ground and pound there. So I think that would be a very effective game plan here. Just hit easy takedowns on Gatto, watch out for that guard submission, lay on top in half guard, look to pass guard, look to stay safe, win rounds with your top control, land ground and pound, maybe even find a finish in these later rounds, because all she has to do is avoid that guard submission and she should be good to win the fight here, because I think Leonardo is the better striker, wrestler. She's beaten the better competition. She's more active. I think that Leonardo should be a pretty clear favorite here. I cap her 55% minimum. So if you can get a plus next to Leonardo's name, I really recommend you take it. I bet her at plus 104. It's currently minus 106, but even if it's slight even money, there's still value on Leonardo. She should be minus 130, minus 150 minimum. And capping Gatto as a favorite here heavily assumes that she's improved over the past 3 years, and there's just no footage to really to indicate that. So I can't trust that to bet her as a favorite. No way. I'll be taking the underdog here, and I'll be cheering for Leonardo to pull off the upset victory, and I think she does. I think she's either going to get a late finish in rounds 2 or 3, or win a pretty comfortable decision here. So let's go with a round 3 TKO for Leonardo, and I think she's cashing as a dog here. The next fight takes place in the bantamweight division. We have Miles Johns as the minus 200 favorite taking on Anderson Dos Santos as the plus 170 underdog. And I have another track bet here, a half unit bet on Anderson Dos Santos as a plus 180 underdog. And this fight was supposed to happen about a month ago, and I was planning on betting Dos Santos there, and nothing has really changed. The line has actually gotten better. The last time I was planning on betting him around plus 150, plus 160. Now I'm getting an even better price, so I'm happy to take a small bet on Dos Santos. I'm not super confident in Dos Santos here. I do think he is at a striking disadvantage, but I think he is the better overall grappler. I think he's got the better jiu-jitsu of the two. I think when the fight stays at the feet, we're going to see Miles Johns working that new and improved jab of his. I think his boxing has been looking to improve these past few fights, and I think he probably will be outstriking, outboxing Anderson Dos Santos, but Dos Santos can come forward. He can string together a combination of punches, and when he gets wild, he can be somewhat effective on the feet with his punches at times. But where I think the real advantage is for Anderson Dos Santos here is in the grappling. Miles Johns does like to grapple a good amount, but he's not really good at anything. I don't think he's a great wrestler. He's certainly not great on top. And I think we have seen him controlled enough by jiu-jitsu guys to think that Anderson Dos Santos has a really good chance to win this fight. If you look at the Cole Smith fight, he was able to take Miles Johns back 2 times in that fight. He got about 7 or 8 minutes of control in that fight. He had a lot of opportunities to get some submissions. And I think that if Anderson Dos Santos watched that fight, he can realize that he has the jiu-jitsu advantage here. Maybe look for some back takes, look to take the grappling to Johns, initiate the grappling. And I think Anderson Dos Santos is just going to be a live dog here. I'm still going to be officially picking Miles Johns to outstrike Dos Santos with that jab to a decision, but I would be happy to be wrong about this one. Like I said, it's not all about the picks, it's about who you think the betting value is on. I would cap Johns as a 60% favorite here. Maybe minus 150, minus 170 would be more appropriate, but minus 200, there's no way I would lay that chalk on Johns. So take a small bet on Anderson Dos Santos here. I think he'll fight for your money, and if he can make this fight into the grappling, I think he's a real live dog to pull off this upset. So official pick, Miles Johns decision, but I'll be cheering for Dos Santos to pull off the dog victory. The next fight takes place in the flyweight division. We have Manel Kape as the minus 202 favorite, taking on Kape-Osbourne as the plus 172 underdog. Manel Kape is still looking for that first UFC victory. His first 2 fights were both difficult matchups. No real shame in losing either of those fights, and I think he put up a respectable effort in both of those fights. Probably should have won that Nicolau decision, winning rounds 2 and 3 there, but the judges gave that one to Nicolau. Before Cape got into the UFC, his main problem was, I think, grappling. He had been out-grappled and lost several fights due to being taken down, but I think his defensive grappling has actually been making big improvements, especially in his first 2 UFC fights. But his biggest problem in the UFC so far has been his output, has been his activity, his aggression. He hasn't been throwing enough strikes, and he has been leaving the fight on the table for these judges to give his opponent the decision. So if he comes out here looking aggressive, looking like a pressure fighter with good volume like he did in round 2 versus Matheus Nicolau, he should be a minus 400 favorite against Osbourne. He probably outboxes Osbourne badly, might even finish Osbourne by a knockout at some point. But if you're looking to bet Cape here, you do have to be concerned that he might still have that same issue of the low output. He might kind of give Osbourne a tentative kickboxing type of fight where he could possibly lose another decision on output. So you always have to have that type of concern when you're laying the minus 200 chalk. I'm not exactly in a rush to bet Cape as a minus 200 favorite, but I do think he should win this fight pretty comfortably. I only see 2 ways that O'Day is able to pull off the upset. He could catch Cape early in round 1, possibly knock him out. O'Day does seem to have some pop behind his punches, so that's slightly possible. And the only other way is maybe Cape has that same issue where he is not aggressive enough and we have a slow, low output decision where either guy could win a coin flip like decision. I don't think either of those are too likely, but I think they're both kind of likely enough to scare me off of laying that minus 200. So Cape's not a guy I would trust at that minus 200 price, but maybe look at that Cape knockout prop. Fight ends by knockout on FanDuel with some pretty good odds. And another prop I like for this fight is fight ends by knockout in round 1. I think these 2 guys have a good chance to come out and just swing at each other. Osbourne is cutting weight down to 125 for the first time in a long time for this fight. So it's possible that O'Day has no chin and Cape might get him out of there in round 1. So I like the Cape knockout props here and possibly even a knockout in the first round. So the pick for me is going to be either Cape by knockout or decision. The next fight takes place in the women's strawweight division. We have Karolina Kowalkiewicz as the minus 137 favorite, taking on Jessica Penne as the plus 117 underdog. A lot of action has been coming in on Karolina Kowalkiewicz's line. I recorded the podcast with Ozzy last night about 24 hours ago, and Kowalkiewicz was minus 120 there. She's now minus 137, so just a lot of action in the past 24 hours coming in on Karolina. And personally, I don't get it. I do not agree with the Karolina action. Karolina has not fought in about a year and a half, and she is on a 4-fight losing streak. I do think with women fighters, you do have to kind of be less concerned about that stuff. Like if you look at Tecia Torres, I think she was on a 3 or 4-fight losing streak, and then all of a sudden turned it around and looked great in her past 2 fights. That's just because the Karolina was actually fighting really high-level competition. This is a step down in competition for her, but Karolina was really looking lost in those fights. She showed no signs of hope, was getting outboxed, out-wrestled, just beaten in every aspect of MMA. She didn't show any of that same tenacity or fire she had earlier in her UFC career, so maybe she comes back rejuvenated and rested here, but in her recent fights, she was not looking good. She was not reacting well to getting hit. She was getting taken down and out-grappled by women who aren't really that great grapplers, so I think there's a good chance that Jessica Penne makes this fight close everywhere. I think the striking will be very competitive. Jessica Penne is coming off a long layoff herself, won her last fight after a 4-year layoff, and I think Penne looks solid everywhere there. She got kind of muscled around and tossed a bit by Godinez, but her chin looked fine, her striking looked serviceable, some decent straight punches and front kicks up the middle. I think that she has the striking to make this fight pretty close. I would still give a slight striking advantage to Karolina, but I don't think it's going to be a big margin at all on the feet. And in the grappling of this matchup, I give a pretty big advantage to Jessica Penne. She doesn't really have reliable wrestling or takedowns to get this fight to the floor, but she has really crafty ways of getting back takes. She's got that long frame for the weight class, and once the fight gets in the clinch, she's really good at slipping out to the back, getting some hooks in, and dragging this fight to the floor. That's really how she won the fight against Godinez, and I think the same game plan could work here. And Karolina actually likes going to the clinch. She might voluntarily end up in the clinch here. The next thing you know, Jessica Penne reverses or slips out the back and is able to take her down or take her back. And I think that there's going to be a lot of close, sloppy, grappling clinch exchanges here. And I think that fight just favors Jessica Penne. She was kind of outgunned. She wasn't the better striker. She wasn't as strong as Godinez in her last fight, but she still found a way to win by getting some crafty positions there, getting those back takes, and just having the better experience and being the better grappler than Godinez. And I think that she could possibly pull off the upset here against Karolina in the same fashion. Now, looking at the odds for this one, there's no way I would be laying the chalk on Karolina Kowalkiewicz, coming off a 1.5-year layoff, hasn't won a fight in 3.5 years, lost 4 fights in a row, was getting out-wrestled by Yan Shannan, and I just can't lay that chalk there. I think that it's dog or pass all day, and I think that Jessica Penne is actually worth a small bet here at plus 117. I think she has all the potential to make this fight close everywhere, and I think she's the better grappler and has the grappling upside here. So I like Jessica Penne to pull off the upset here. I think she is going to get those back takes, those clinch positions that favor her, and I think that she's going to find a way to grapple her way to a decision victory here. So I like Penne to pull off the upset victory as the dog. The next fight takes place in the light heavyweight division. We have Alonzo-Menifield as the minus 240 favorite, taking on Ed Herman as the plus 205 underdog. Not a huge fan of Alonzo-Menifield. I don't think he's really a good fighter at all. He's a great athlete, but doesn't really take advantage of those athletic attributes that he has. He's not a smart fighter. He doesn't seem to be making any improvements whatsoever as a fighter, and he also has a big gas problem. The later the fight goes, he tends to gas out. He doesn't really have any success in the UFC past the 4-minute mark. I was kind of noticing this the other day looking at his record. He has a few knockouts around the 3 or 4 minute mark of round 1 against Moreira, against Craig. He tapped out Sharon in round 1, but the Dev Clark fight, he tired out 3 or 4 minutes into that one, got his ass kicked in rounds 2 and 3 there. He was getting soundly beaten by OSP the entire fight, got completely dominated in round 2 there. So if Ed Herman is able to survive past the 3 or 4 minute mark here, that's typically when Alonzo-Menifield starts to gas out and slow down. So that's really what you have to look out for in this fight. Can Ed Herman survive that early storm and make it past 3, 4, 5 minutes? And he should have the advantage once the fight gets into round 2, round 3. He's the much more experienced fighter. Probably the more well-rounded fighter, honestly. Even though he is old, he's slow, he's not the fighter he once was. He's been taking some beatings in his most recent fight, especially the most recent one against Mike Rodriguez, but I don't put a whole lot of stock into that loss. Or actually, it was a win. He pulled off the comeback win because Mike Rodriguez would do the same thing to Alonzo-Menifield. Ed Herman got beat up there, but it's not really too relevant because Rodriguez is a better striker than Alonzo-Menifield is. So there's a good chance that Alonzo catches Ed Herman with a punch and puts his lights out in round 1 here. There's a good chance that he hurts him and rushes into the clinch and typically makes it a boring clinch grindy fight like he typically likes to do. A lot of outcomes are on the table here. It's a Alonzo-Menifield fight. It doesn't really make a whole lot of sense, but I like Ed Herman's chances to pull off the upset if it gets into rounds 2 and 3 here. So look to live bet Ed Herman. Probably better off staying away pre-fight. If you do pre-fight bet anyone here, you definitely got to bet Ed Herman. I mean, I would go pretty small and plan to add more in the live lines after Alonzo-Menifield starts to slow down. But there is a really good chance that Alonzo-Menifield just rocks Ed Herman with a punch, swarms him, and gets the upset or the favorite victory here in round 1. I guess I'll go with that as my official pick. Alonzo round 1 knockout is the official pick. But boy, I hope I am wrong here. I hope Alonzo gasses out and loses a decision victory to Ed Herman here. So it would be great to see the old veteran pull off the upset victory. I'll be cheering for him here as the plus 200 underdog. No pre-fight bets I really love, and the best bet I advise is a live bet on Ed Herman halfway through round 1, towards the end of round 1. So official pick, Alonzo round 1 knockout. The next fight takes place in the bantamweight division. We have Drako Rodriguez as the minus 118 favorite, taking on Vince Morales as the minus 102 underdog. I'm actually pretty surprised to see Drako Rodriguez as the favorite here. I don't really think he's that great of a fighter, and I just rewatched a lot of his footage, and the guy really only wins fights by submission. A lot of his fights involve grappling, where he immediately gets into the grappling in the first 15 seconds of a round. He's usually not the one hitting takedowns. He doesn't have really reliable wrestling to get the fight to the floor. He's usually the one getting taken down and then looks to reverse or looks to get a guard submission off of his back, and he does look like a decent overall grappler, probably the better grappler than Vince Morales here, but if he has no reliable wrestling to get the fight to the floor, I can't really rely on him to get the fight into the grappling. So I expect the fight to stay on the feet most of the time, and there I just see a clear advantage for Vince Morales here. I think he's the better striker, faster, more power, more layered in defense. I mean, both guys are a bit chinny. They've both been rocked and dropped, but what we saw from Rodriguez in his last fight against Alamine Zahabi, I mean, Zahabi is not really that great of a boxer, and he was able to rock and drop and completely knock out Drako Rodriguez in round 1 there, just because Rodriguez was so predictable with his offense. I really think that Drako is a low-level striker, and when this fight is in the feet, Morales should be outstriking him pretty easily here, possibly even knocking Rodriguez out. I like the Morales knockout prop at plus 380 or something like that. I guess there is the slight concern about the leg kicks from Morales. He is extremely leg kickable, got dismantled in his last fight by Chris Gutierrez, but Gutierrez is a legitimate striker. He broke him down with a lot of process that Drako Rodriguez doesn't have. So even if Drako does attack the calf kicks here, Morales' biggest weakness, I don't trust him on the feet enough to continue that success. And I think if he tries to strike with Morales for long periods of time, he's probably going to get outboxed and eat right hands and possibly even hurt and knocked out here. So unless Draco has randomly improved his wrestling here, I don't expect him to win. Vince Morales is a decent defensive grappler, nothing special, but I think he's good enough to avoid that guard submission, that triangle, that armbar that Draco is going to throw up on the ground. And I think Morales is going to outstrike him pretty badly on the feet here. So I like Morales. I don't think he should be the underdog. I think he should be the slight minus 130, minus 150 even favorite. And I like his knockout prop, as I mentioned, at plus 380. And I think there's a good chance he wins by knockout, a slight chance he wins by decision. But Vince Morales is going to be my pick to pull off the upset victory here. The next fight takes place in the lightweight division. We have Rafael Fiziev as the minus 290 favorite, taking on Bobby Green as the plus 230 underdog. I've got another bet tracked on this fight, and it is on the underdog here, Bobby Green. I have a 0.7 unit bet on him as the plus 260 underdog. Got him a few days ago, plus 260, and the market has finally started to realize that this line is wide. Bettors are coming in on Bobby Green these past few days. I got him at plus 260. He's plus 230 now, but even at plus 230, there is some value left. I think Fiziev at maybe minus 200, minus 250 at the highest is the most I would cap him at here. And I think that Bobby Green is just going to make this fight close everywhere. Obviously, Fiziev has the striking advantage, likely the faster, more powerful striker on the feet, but Bobby Green is a tough guy to outstrike. He's a very crafty striker of his own right. And make no mistake, Bobby Green is the better grappler here. Bobby Green is a tremendous defensive grappler that shouldn't come into play here. But he also can offensive grapple from time to time. He's not really known for it, but he can hit offensive takedowns. He can hit some upper body trips. He can go for the legs and get a double or single leg. And the guy has actually hit offensive takedowns in I think all 4 of his most recent fights. So look for him to get this fight in the clinch, wear down on Fiziev a little bit, take away some of the power in Fiziev's arms, and look to hit some takedowns where he should have the grappling advantage, should have the wrestling advantage. And I know Fiziev has displayed some pretty decent takedown defense in his fights, but I think Bobby Green is probably the best overall fighter he's fought to date. Maybe Renato Moicano is a little bit better than Green, but it's a very tough comparison to make. And Moicano just didn't really fight that well in that fight. He stayed at range, he stayed at distance where Fiziev is at his best, and I don't think that Bobby Green is going to do that. I think Bobby Green is going to pressure him, he's going to get him against the cage, he's going to try to get this fight ugly in the clinch and the grappling, and I think he's got a great chance to do that, and if he can, I think he's got a great chance to pull off the upset victory via decision here. Bobby Green, not much of a finisher, but he can wear on you, he can win rounds, and he doesn't have the best round winning styles too, so you can't be uber confident in him. But if he can survive the biggest power from Fiziev in round 1, I think he's got a good chance to pull off the upset decision victory in rounds 2 and 3 here with his grappling, with his cardio, with his experience advantage. He is the much more experienced fighter in MMA, make no mistake, and he's been on a pretty good run. Had a close decision loss to Thiago Moises in his last fight, but he really could be on a 4-fight win streak over pretty solid competition. So don't write Bobby Green off, even though he's the plus 200 or higher underdog here, and I'll still be picking Rafael Fiziev to win the fight by decision or knockout as my official pick. Probably decision, probably 29-28 decision for Fiziev, but I like Bobby Green's chances to make this decision close and to possibly pull off the upset. So plus 260, I'm in on him at that price. And Bobby Green by decision, maybe that prop also has some value. So I'll be cheering for Bobby Green, one of my favorite fighters, honestly, on the entire roster. Hopefully he pulls off this upset victory. I like Rafael Fiziev a lot, but I just don't think he deserves minus 300 quite this early in his MMA career. So Fiziev decision knockout's the pick, but go Bobby Green. The next fight is the first fight on the main card and takes place in the bantamweight division. We have Kape-Osbourne as the minus 118 favorite, taking on Song-Kenney as the minus 102 underdog. I agree with Kape-Osbourne being the slight favorite in this spot. I just think he has a lot more ways to win the fight. I think he could win the striking, and I think he definitely has the grappling upside here against Song-Kenney. And Song-Kenney is definitely the faster, more powerful striker on the feet. He has that power in his right hand, but he is so reliant on that right hand and his punches. I really don't think he's that versatile of a fighter. I think Kape-Osbourne is the more versatile striker overall. Kape-Osbourne fights out of that southpaw stance and really mixes it up between the legs, the body, the head, his punches, his kick combinations well, while Song-Kenney is really relying on that right hand of his, throws the occasional leg kick, but really it's just leg kicks and boxing. He doesn't offensive wrestle. He doesn't have a diverse kicking game. And if you can start to pressure Song-Kenney, put him on the back foot, he's not as effective. And if you can circle away from that right hand of his, you really take away his biggest weapon. And Kape-Osbourne is a smart fighter. I think he'll be well prepared to deal with that right hand of Song-Kenney. And the striking exchanges are going to be really competitive between these two. I could see it being 50-50 the entire time. I don't think one guy will really differentiate themselves as the better striker. If it is one guy, it probably is going to be Song Yadong with the power behind his punches. He possibly could stun and rock Kape-Osbourne at some points here, but if that happens, I expect Kape-Osbourne to try to get this fight into the grappling, where he should be the much better grappler. I think he does have the wrestling ability to take Song Yadong down. We have seen Yadong taken down in the Kyler Phillips fight, the Cody Stamann fight. Even Marlon Vera was able to get him down a few times there. So I think Kape-Osbourne has the wrestling to get him down, could be able to out-grapple him, win some minutes, win some rounds, and possibly sway close rounds. And one last factor to think about in this fight is who's going to have the better cardio. Both these guys have sort of slowed down at times throughout their career. They haven't been necessarily gassed, but they have slowed down throughout high-paced fights. I don't think either one has a bad gas tank per se, but I do think we can theorize on who has the better gas tank of the two, and I do think it is Kape-Osbourne. I think we've seen him in a lot higher pace fights and dig deep in round 3, especially the Nathaniel Wood fight where that was 1-1 heading into round 3, and Kape-Osbourne really leaned on his grappling, his wrestling advantage there to get the fight to the floor, to get a back take, and to secure that round with his grappling control. So I think a similar situation could happen here, 1-1 heading into round 3, and the grappling and cardio advantage of Kape-Osbourne could come into play to sway him that last round. So I slightly lean towards Kape-Osbourne here. Song Yadong does have a window to win with his boxing, keeping this fight on the floor and landing that power punch of his, but I do think Kape-Osbourne has more ways to win, as I've been explaining. So I like Kape-Osbourne to win a decision here. Kape-Osbourne by decision prop at plus 175, plus 180 has some value. And Moneyline, I think, has some slight value as well. And maybe even look to live bet, add more on Kape-Osbourne after round 1. That should be Song Yadong's best round. And if Kape-Osbourne can get past that, he should be pretty smooth sailing in rounds 2 and 3. So possibly look to add some more in Kape-Osbourne's live line. The next fight takes place in the women's strawweight division. We have Tecia Torres as the minus 137 favorite, taking on Angela Hill as the plus 117 underdog. So this fight is a rematch of a fight that happened about 6 years ago. Tecia Torres won a pretty easy unanimous decision there, and the way the fight went is that Torres wasn't really engaging much on the feet. She didn't feel the need that she had to strike, and she was correct because she could hit easy takedowns on Angela Hill, was able to catch Angela off guard and hit some open space takedowns, and was able to keep top position on Angela Hill pretty easily. Hill was a pretty weak defensive grappler back then, but looking over the past 5 or 6 years at who the fighter who has improved more is, I think it's definitely Angela Hill. I think she's gotten better as a striker, certainly as a defensive grappler, and I think Angela Hill in the past 2 years alone has made big strides in her defensive grappling. She was taken down, held down, and tapped out by Randa Marcos about 2 years ago, but has been really improving that takedown defense. She was able to get up from bottom position against Claudia Gadelha, stuff takedowns from Gadelha, stuff takedowns from Michelle Waterson, and I think that Angela is really getting better as a defensive grappler, and no doubt she's getting better as a striker. I think the striking exchanges between these women are going to be really competitive. I think neither woman is going to look like more than a 60% favorite when the fight is in the feet. I don't think either woman is going to justify being a favorite when the fight is standing. If anyone does, I do expect it to be Angela Hill. And if you're betting Tecia Torres here as a favorite, minus 137, you better be pretty confident that she's going to hit takedowns on Angela Hill, because she's not going to cover minus 137 if this fight stays standing. She just won't, in my opinion. It's going to be too close for you to feel comfortable about Torres minus 130 when the fight is staying standing. So if you are confident that Tecia Torres is going to hit takedowns here, she probably still is the better wrestler of the two. She probably is stronger, so she might be able to get the fight in the clinch and kind of rip Hill down to the ground off of a takedown. But I think Hill's got a better chance to get up. I think she's got a much better chance to stuff the takedowns. And I do think the striking slightly favors Angela Hill. The clinch exchanges probably slightly favor Angela Hill. So I'm going to be leaning towards my girl Angela Hill here. I bet on her at plus 200 to win a decision here. I think I picked Tecia Torres as my official pick on some podcasts. I guess that still is my official pick. I'll be glad to be wrong and for my girl Angela Hill to pull off the upset victory, and I'll cash a bet on it because I bet Angela Hill by decision at plus 200. I think there's good value on that, and I think this fight's going to be a lot closer than their first fight. I think Hill's improved more of the two, and I think she's ready for this matchup, so I think it's going to be a close, competitive coin flip type of decision. I hope my girl Angela Hill gets it, although my official pick will be Tecia Torres for official pick's sake. The next fight takes place in the welterweight division. We have Vicente Luque as the minus 122 favorite, taking on Michael Chiesa as the plus 102 underdog. This is a great matchup, but I'm not expecting a great fight. I think this is going to be a pretty one of two outcomes type of thing. Luque is either going to stop the takedowns and butcher Chiesa on the feet, or Chiesa is going to hit those takedowns and outgrapple Luque. I doubt one guy wins round one and doesn't win the rest of the fight. You know what I mean? Like, I think if whoever gets out to the round one lead is going to continue that success to either they find a finish or just dominate to a decision. So if it's Luque stuffing the takedowns, he's probably going to knock Chiesa out in rounds 2 or 3. If it's Chiesa hitting the takedowns, he's probably just going to cruise on top to a decision victory, out-grappling Vicente Luque here. Michael Chiesa has looked tremendous since moving up to 170 pounds. He's 4-0, and he really hasn't had any adversity at all, except for maybe the leg kicks, the early striking attack of Rafael dos Anjos, but he was still able to win a comfortable decision there, and he doesn't really have any signature wins. He probably doesn't have the same resume that Vicente Luque does at 170 pounds, but he looks tremendous. He looks at his all-time best here, and Vicente Luque is looking really good too. He's always in entertaining fights, probably one of the most consistently entertaining fighters ever, but the guy has been in a ton of striking matchups. He's been pretty fortunate to not run into too many grapplers. In a division with Gilbert Burns and Colby Covington and Kamaru Usman, he really hasn't had to face that many high-level grapplers like that. And Michael Chiesa is the most dedicated grappler that he's fought in several years. The last time we really saw Vicente Luque fight a dedicated grappler was in the Leon Edwards fight. Not like Leon Edwards is 100% a grappler, but he did look to grapple for most of that fight. He did have success hitting takedowns, keeping Luque on his back for certain periods of time, and that really tired Luque out in that fight. Luque typically has great cardio in striking fights in round 3 of striking fights, but this grappling fight, he was dead tired in round 3. He just wasn't used to that same pace. And I think that's why I have a hard time picking him here, because he hasn't faced many grapplers. He's been taken down by some inferior fighters like Nico Price, Randy Brown, Derek Krantz. All three of those guys taking him down is not a good look. And if I'm betting Vicente Luque is a favorite here against Michael Chiesa, I want to see some really proven good takedown defense, some good get-ups, solid defensive grappling in all areas, and I don't think we've seen that from Vicente Luque. We saw him taken down by the fighters I was mentioned. He gave up his back briefly to Derek Krantz, and I just think that Michael Chiesa is too good of a grappler to pick against him here. I think he's going to have an easier time getting those takedowns and securing them than Vicente Luque will have at defending those takedowns and keeping Chiesa off of him. And as I mentioned, this will be a pretty binary fight. I think either guy will probably look like a minus 300 favorite no matter who wins. It's either going to be Luque, bashing his calves in with calf kicks, outboxing him really badly, stuffing takedowns, and probably knocking Chiesa out, or it's going to be Chiesa putting on a wrestling and grappling top control clinic and grappling to either a dominant decision or maybe even a submission. I think it'll be a decision for Chiesa, and I think if Luque wants to win, it's going to have to be a knockout. So I like Michael Chiesa in this fight. I have a 1-unit bet tracked on him at plus 125 odds, and I think he's going to grapple and wrestle his way to a decision victory here. Probably 30-27 decision victory for Chiesa here. The next fight is the co-main event in the bantamweight division. We have Jose Aldo as the minus 116 favorite, taking on Pedro Munoz as the minus 104 underdog. First off, we got to say this is an incredible matchup between two great fighters. I'm a huge fan of both guys. Aldo, one of the greatest fighters ever. Munoz, one of the most underrated fighters in the UFC right now. This is going to be an incredible fight. I would be happy with either guy winning this fight, but I would be happier if the guy who I bet on won, and that guy is Pedro Munoz. I do have a 1.5 unit bet on his money line at plus 116 odds, and I also have a small 0.2 unit bet on Pedro Munoz in round 3 at plus 1800 odds, and this is a really close matchup. I realistically could see either guy winning a decision here, and I think the first half of the fight favors Jose Aldo. I think he'll probably be landing his jab on Munoz. Munoz never has the best boxing defense, but he kind of just pressures you and eats shots until he eventually wears down on you. So I think Aldo's going to get out to an early lead here, likely win round 1, maybe land some leg kicks of his own, some body punches, and that jab to the head of Munoz. And the first half of the fight favors Aldo. We might see Munoz at plus money in the live lines, but I think as the fight goes, the second half of the fight is going to really start to favor Munoz, because Munoz is the pressure fighter. He has great attritional tools like his front kick to the body, his leg kicks, his body punches, and it's going to be really interesting to see the leg kick battle between these guys. Jose Aldo is a great defensive striker as well, and I think he's going to be well prepared to deal with those calf kicks and those front kicks of Munoz, better than most opponents of Munoz have. So it's going to be really interesting to see who wins the leg kick battle between these two, and that really could lead to victory on either side here. So far, all I've been talking about is striking between these two because I doubt any grappling happens here. I know Jose Aldo hit a takedown in his last fight against Marlon Vera to seal a decision victory and to win round 3 there, but I doubt that's going to happen here. Pedro Munoz is a tremendous defensive grappler, so I think this fight is going to be entirely striking. So you really got to think about who you favor over the full 15 minutes. I know I said Jose Aldo is going to get out to an early lead, probably wins round 1, but I think round 2 is going to be a 50-50 type of round, and I think round 3 heavily favors Pedro Munoz because I just don't think Aldo can keep up with that pace and that pressure of Pedro Munoz at this 135 weight class. We haven't really seen Aldo push a super high pace. The highest pace that he did push was against Peter Yan. He did go hard for the full 15 minutes there, eventually slow down in the second half of that fight, but I think this fight's going to be a little different. I think Aldo's going to wear down a little bit harder round 3 with the nonstop pressure, the leg kicks, the body work of Pedro Munoz, and I think we're probably going to see a pretty dominant round 3 for Munoz, possibly getting a finish, maybe a 10-8 round. We could be looking at a 29-27 decision for Munoz, possibly a 28-28 draw. So I think a ton of outcomes are on the table here. I think Aldo could scrape by a 29-28 decision, likely winning rounds 1 and 2, losing round 3. I think it could even happen that Munoz finishes him by knockout in round 3. So I like a lot of props here. I'm on Pedro's money line. I'm on Pedro round 3. And I also could like a stab at the draw, plus 6,600 for a fight that I think could be a 28-28 draw. Not a bad fight to stab on the draw at. So I would be pleased with either outcome here. Jose Aldo, my favorite fighter ever, pulling off this, in my opinion, an upset victory this late into his career against a great fighter like Munoz. That would be amazing to see, but I obviously would prefer Munoz to win because I do have a bet tracked on him. And looking at where the line is at now, I do agree with where it's at now. A slight pick 'em, both guys in the minus 110 range. I think that's right. I think either guy could win this fight. If it goes to the decision, it probably slightly favors Aldo. If it ends by finish, it probably is going to be Munoz finishing. Munoz no scorecard is not a bad bet as well. So this is an amazing fight. Cannot wait for this one. Probably the most intriguing matchup on the entire card. And my pick is going to be Munoz by either round 3 finish or a 29-27 decision type of thing for Munoz. So Munoz is my pick, and I'll be betting him as well. The next fight is the main event of the card and takes place in the heavyweight division. For the interim heavyweight championship, we have Lewis-Gane as the minus 361 favorite, taking on Derek Lewis as the plus 286 underdog. I think this line is still a bit short. I would cap Gane at closer to 80% here, maybe even as high as 85%. And I guess this is a somewhat intriguing matchup. You got the more technical, the fancier striker in Lewis-Gane versus the knockout artist Derek Lewis fighting in his hometown of Houston. Should be real fun to see Derek Lewis in front of his hometown crowd, but unfortunately for the Houston fans, I do think that Derek Lewis is probably going to get shut out here. I just think that Lewis-Gane is so much better of a striker. Better athlete, better footwork, so much faster. He's got more striking tools. He's got great leg kicks. He's got great body kicks. He's a solid boxer. I mean, I was just raving about Lewis-Gane against Alexander Volkov. That was only about 2 months ago, and he's making this quick turnaround after a dominant performance over Volkov. I mean, Lewis-Gane has proven he has the output to go the full 5 rounds. He can strike at a high output for 25 minutes straight. I mean, I really can't say enough good things about Lewis-Gane. Certainly nothing negative I can think about him to say for this matchup because Derek Lewis needs to find that knockout with the perfect strike. He's going to have to land that perfect punch and shut Lewis-Gane's lights out because I don't think he can win the fight any other way. Winning by submission or decision seems virtually impossible for Derek Lewis for me. So if you like Derek Lewis here, take him by knockout. I say that about most of his fights. In a 3-round fight, okay, sure, he might be able to win a decision when he's fighting short, stocky, not that good fighters like Blagoy-Ivanov, like Ira Latifi. He can maybe pull off a decision there. But over 5 rounds against a great athlete and a great striker like Lewis-Gane, he's just not going to win rounds. He's not going to win a decision. And the only way he can win is by knockout. So instead of taking Derek Lewis money line, just take Derek Lewis knockout plus 350, plus 400. But even that, I don't think is that much value. This is going to sound pretty similar to my Curtis Blaydes analysis from the last fight. Curtis Blaydes was obviously a moron ducking his head into that uppercut. I mean, he was faking that takedown for 15 seconds straight, and he finally shot the takedown. Derek Lewis timed it with a beautiful uppercut and sent him out cold. It was an incredible knockout, one of the knockouts of the year. Credit to Derek Lewis for pulling off the upset there, but the difference in this matchup is that Lewis-Gane doesn't make mistakes like that. He doesn't put his head in positions where Derek Lewis is going to be able to find that perfect counter shot. when you think about the distance management skills between Curtis Blaydes and Ciryl Gane, it's a pretty huge difference. So I just don't see Gane putting himself in a vulnerable position like Curtis Blaydes was doing there. So it's just going to be really hard for Derek Lewis to find the knockout shot. He's going to be running into leg kicks. He's going to be getting body kicked. He's going to be getting lit up with that jab of Ciryl Gane. And he's going to have a hard time just tracking Ciryl Gane down in this big cage against the better athlete with the better footwork. It's just going to be hard for Derek Lewis to find the chin of Ciryl Gane. I don't see it happening. I think the fight is going to go like Ciryl Gane is going to dominate until Derek Lewis can find that knockout shot. Do you think that knockout shot's going to happen? Yes or no? I don't. So I think Ciryl Gane's going to win the fight. And earlier in the week, I tweeted out that Ciryl Gane was still available at minus 310. I did jump on that, and this is the fighter I parlayed Johnny Munoz with. Earlier in the card, I mentioned that about 30 minutes ago. So if you're still listening, I appreciate you guys listening. But I did parlay Ciryl Gane at minus 310 with Johnny Munoz at minus 230. That came out to almost even money. So I think that's a really good parlay. I capped both guys closer to 80%. So there's still some value left if you parlay the two of those. And the last question about this Ciryl Gane fight becomes, does Ciryl Gane finish by knockout or does he cruise to a decision like he typically does? And when the fight was first announced 6 weeks ago or something, I was leaning towards decision. Gane was coming off of that decision victory over Rosenstrike and Volkov. He kind of cruised to the full 5 rounds in both of those fights, didn't chase the knockout. So I was kind of assuming he was going to do that again, but after watching the Lewis and Blaydes fight, just seeing how badly Lewis looked when he got hit there, I mean, he was getting easy leg kicked by Blaydes, he was getting hit with some punches, and he didn't look as durable as he typically did in his recent fights or in his past fights throughout his career. He was just not reacting well to getting hit by Curtis Blaydes, so I think that Ciryl Gane's going to have him in a lot more trouble. The leg kicks are going to limit his movement, the body kicks are going to drain the energy, and we know that Derek Lewis is weak to the body. He's been hurt by body shots a few times, most recently by Junior Dos Santos. I mean, just 2 or 3 years ago, Junior Dos Santos was dropping Lewis with punches. He hurt him with a body kick. He finished him in round 2. And I think it's pretty safe to say at this point that 2021 Ciryl Gane is a better striker than 2018 Junior Dos Santos. So I see Ciryl Gane having similar success. I think he's going to outstrike him badly, probably get a knockout in rounds 2 or 3. But if he didn't really chase that knockout and just cruise to another 5-round decision, picking apart Lewis to a 50-45, that wouldn't really shock me either. So I don't really like betting on Gane decision versus Gane knockout here. I think either could happen. I'm leaning a bit towards knockout in rounds 2 or 3, but like I said, both outcomes are on the table. And a Lewis knockout, of course, would shock me. I cap him closer to 15 to 20% here. So if you like Derek Lewis at all here, don't bet his money line, bet his knockout. And that's my advice for this fight. I think Gane's going to win by knockout in round 2 as my official prediction. And that's going to do it for the podcast. This episode went a bit long this week, but I watched a lot of tape for these fights. I have some pretty strong leans here, and I have a lot of thoughts in these fights, so that's why I talk for a while. And I also have a lot more bets than I traditionally do. Usually risk about 5 or 6 units a card on BetMMA, but I'm close to 10 units at this point, so it's going to be a big card of track bets. Hopefully it's going to be profit. Johnny Munoz is the lock of the century, and hope you all enjoy the fights this weekend. Hope you all win some bets, and there's no UFC next week, so I'll see you guys in 2 weeks before the next UFC card. Peace.